Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds of Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by my Tampa Bay compatriot over at the Cannon Fire podcast. He is Rhett Matthew at Retticus on the Twitters. Welcome back to the show, Rhett. I was on the Cannon Fire podcast earlier this year, and I'll be back on tomorrow as well, but had to get you on Dirty Birds and Brews as well. Welcome back to the show. Aside from that travesty that happened at the end of the Bucs game, which we're going to talk about, how are you doing on this fine Thursday?
Doing about as good as I can be. You know, the Bucs have been competitive. They've been fun to watch this year, which is always nice. But yeah, before we started the podcast, you got to see me blow a gasket a little bit over the end of that Monday Night Football game against Baltimore. That was a car wreck, wasn't it? Yeah. I mean, you know, the considering the weekend the entire NFL had, like, it seemed like there were a ton of brutal injuries over the weekend. A lot of guys, their seasons just cut short. And unfortunately, the Bucs couldn't escape that. I was upset. Evan was upset, my co-host, and a lot of our audience members were upset. A lot of Bucs fans are upset because a lot of people feel like Chris Godwin shouldn't have been on the field in the first place. You know, Mike Evans is another conversation as well. He was playing visibly hurt with hamstring issues against New Orleans, and they dialed him back. They were still able to score 51 points. Well, Mike Evans is featured in the first drive of the game, gets that touchdown against Baltimore, is visibly injured. Now, it was Mike Evans' decision to shake off the trainers, and you know what? Maybe that's on him as a player wanting to be out there for his teammates. I kind of get that. There probably wasn't a coach or a trainer on the sideline telling Mike Evans he wasn't going to be in that game, but he ends up getting hurt. Now the report is he won't be back until after the bye week at least. I don't know how I feel about that, but Chris Godwin, man, not only is he done for the year, but the trajectory he was on, it's a contract year for Chris Godwin, and in the final 40 seconds of the game, a game that despite everything kind of falling in Tampa Bay's favor in that fourth quarter, it still felt like it was too little too late. When the Bucs are driving down the field, after recovering an onside kick, the Baltimore Ravens still had a 99.9% chance to win that game. I think there were a lot of moments in that second half where it would have been perfectly acceptable for the Bucs to kind of fold and, you know, get out of there healthy. But you get aggressive and you get bit in the ass. And yeah, I think it's tough to come away from a loss like that looking for silver linings.
Right.
You know, you want to look for ways this team can continue to improve. And I think they're going to do a lot of things well here over the next couple of weeks. We're certainly going to see what they're made of, right? Without two of their top touchdown scorers on the offensive side of the ball. But I don't know. We'll see if Todd Bowles and the rest of his staff can make some much needed adjustments here. But it's hard to not feel at least a little bit depressed after that game last week. Still tough to swallow here. So I know I'm rambling to start the show.
No, it's Rhett. So I was like screaming at my TV with 5 minutes left in the game, like, because like I really respect, the Bucs passing game, and I think anyone who's a logical fantasy owner probably owns at least one part of the Bucs passing offense, like, and I think everyone was like, no, like, just it's time to pack it in. I mean, we saw the Falcons down less points, pack it in late in the fourth quarter for their final drive. And get Michael Penix some reps. I know that everyone was excited to see that, but throws one pass, it was complete. So, he's a perfect quarterback as far as I'm concerned. But man, it wasn't just like playing starters. It was like the way they were playing was like reckless abandon. Like I mentioned it before we went live, like Kate Otten took like 5 nasty hits in a row. Just like the Ravens were just letting him have it and then just annihilating him. And I was like, man, they're just getting Kate Otten killed. And then, Baker Mayfield took a couple sacks. Like, you never want to see that, like, either. And it just seemed to be a disconnect because, everyone focuses on when Godwin got hurt, which is the Bucs were down 10. And if you take that in the vacuum, it's like, oh, it's like a minute to go, 10 points. It's like not impossible, right? They should have pulled the starters with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter when they were down 41 to 18. That was when the starters should have been pulled, because that's really what we're talking about, is the game is out of hand. And that's why the Ravens didn't even try to get a first down, really, when they got the ball back, is because they knew it's like, we just need to use our timeouts, and, the game's basically over. So, I just don't get it, because you mentioned it, like it's a non-conference game. Against a good opponent, like, and you're down big, and you've got to play in like 5 days. Like, it's going to be a short week for you. So you just take the rest and get out of there. You've already lost one receiver, a big time contributor. And obviously, the chances of suffering an injury like the one that Godwin suffered are low, but you didn't have to take the chances at all. For a 1 in 1,000 chance of a win, you probably took a higher chance of someone getting hurt and missing time on those final couple drives. And I just don't really see the calculus there. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, the context of that entire game is important because, by the third quarter, we knew it was going to be an ass whipping. Like, that's just what it was. There was a point in the game, I Bleav it was in the third quarter. I don't even remember what the score was at this point. I've tried to cleanse it from my brain, but the Bucs were able to put up some points there in the second half. They march down the field, they score a touchdown. The very next possession, the Ravens get the ball, and Derrick Henry rips off an 81-yard run to set up yet another scoring drive for the Ravens. So at that point, after Derrick Henry was smiling, going 22 miles per hour past the Buccaneers bench, the game probably should have been over. I think it's just about accepting, like, listen, man, this game is over. We're not quite there yet. The Bucs are a good team this year, but this was a chance for them to measure where they are among one of the best teams in the NFL. It was an 0-2 start for Baltimore, but winning 5 in a row since then shows you that having a 2-time NFL MVP quarterback in Lamar Jackson, he can turn things on whenever he wants to. And they certainly got things going. Like, they're one of the best. So it is completely fine to just wave the white flag, get out of there healthy, and focus on a much more important matchup coming up next week. Because this game against Atlanta, we're 7 games into the NFL season here, but we've reached a point now where the Panthers are the Panthers. The Saints kind of fell off. I was worried about them after the first 2 weeks of the season, but the Bucs beat them so bad they seemingly forgot how to play football. And now you've got Tampa Bay and Atlanta, 2 teams with obviously a lot of interesting games left on their schedule, I will say. But
Yeah.
I would say this matchup this week is going to determine who wins the NFC South. Because if Atlanta can beat Tampa and they can pull off the sweep, Evan and I have both agreed. I feel terrible because I feel like I've just been beaten up on my own team since I got on here. But Evan and I both agree if the Bucs cannot win this week, I don't think they're going to win the NFC South. I think you're going to fall a little too far behind. I know that their schedule favors them after the bye week, but you still got a couple of former NFC, AFC champions between now and then. You got Kansas City, San Francisco, and then again the Falcons. So I can't think of another loss in recent history where the Bucs lost more than just the game, right? The long-term implications of losing Chris Godwin and Mike Evans in this Buccaneers offense, it just means a lot. And we're going to see what they're made of because Liam Cohen is definitely going to have to flex his muscles this week. He's done a really good job in his first year as Buccaneers offensive coordinator, but a huge part of that offensive success is the ability of Mike Evans to not only garner double coverage for most of the game, even if he's not healthy, he still gets attention. And then Chris Godwin, being as successful as he has been this year, playing out of the slot once again, both of them went into Monday night leading the NFL in touchdowns. So, it cannot be understated how important they have been for setting up a lot of the quick looks that this offense has had. Baker Mayfield, really good passer percentage for the most part, playing really well aside from the interceptions, got a little rattled, couldn't get out of it against Baltimore. But a lot of the success he's had is throwing underneath. They're not attacking over the top. They're not pushing that far down the field because Mike Evans and Chris Godwin do such a good job at setting things up for the guys underneath that, you're going to have an open guy no matter what if they're both on the field, at least with Liam Cohen's offensive game plan so far. So, it is not an easy task to replace either Mike Evans or Chris Godwin here, but the Bucs are going to have to do that and then some. There's again just so much to unpack after that Monday night game. Sorry for the rant, but it's literally all we've been thinking about all week is dude, what now?
Yeah. What now? Exactly. And things don't get any easier for the Bucs. I think they're going into arguably their hardest stretch, starting with the Baltimore game, their hardest stretch of games of the whole season. They have Baltimore, then it's back home to face Atlanta, where weirdly Atlanta's had more success in Tampa Bay lately. Obviously Atlanta does get the win in Atlanta to kind of break that streak, but that hasn't necessarily been super helpful in this particular matchup. But we've also got Kansas, what is it? San Francisco, and then is it Kansas City is the other one? I mean,
Kansas City
just,
on prime time. So
yeah.
they play Monday night against Baltimore. They've got the they got the Falcons this coming Sunday, and then they are back on Monday Night Football against the defending back-to-back Super Bowl champs.
Yeah, yeah, and San Francisco hasn't been as dominant, but that's a tough team to play. It's just, this
Tough
is a brutal stretch.
Yeah, tough matchup for Tampa. These last few times they've played San Francisco, they've had no answers.
Yeah, and it's tough. And, to me, it's like just getting into this game a little bit more. Like, I was worried about, could the Tampa Bay offense keep it going with Liam Cohen, because we saw how much success Dave Canales had. And a lot of people, I think, attributed Baker's, resurgence to Dave Canales and his ability to kind of get the best out of him. And there were a lot of questions like, oh, can Liam Cohen keep that going? And I think the answer is, yeah, absolutely he could, which is great. The bigger surprise to me has been that the defense has been such a problem. And I know the injuries have piled up, but to me, I thought like, okay, well, they've been missing Anton Winfield. He's such a key piece to that defense. When he comes back, it's all going to get better. Really, like, I mean, obviously him being back is nice, but like it really hasn't been fixed. And then the injuries continue to pile up. Now we've got Tyreek Funderburk, I think, is playing meaningful snaps. I think was he a UDFA for you guys or,
yeah.
And Tyke Smith now has a concussion. He's been a nice surprise this year as a rookie. Obviously, you're just so relieved that Zion McCollum, like, I think he was the biggest secondary question coming into the year, and he's been the best player of all of them. So, thank God he's there, right? Otherwise, it would be a complete disaster. But what's been the problem with the Bucs defense? I mean, obviously the injuries are a big part of it, but it seems like that side of the ball has just kind of fallen behind where expectations were.
Yeah, execution is going to be one thing. The scheme is going to be another. But when you have a defensive-minded head coach and you've got a defense that is getting worse every year, all eyes are going to go to Todd Bowles here. And, the injuries are definitely going to play a factor. Again, when you're using undrafted free agents playing meaningful snaps at corner, nickel corner, safety, wherever it may be, guys like Tyke Smith going down, Antoine Winfield missing extended time, like it's going to affect you. But you're also hearing about other players who have had success in the past, but like it's just not translating this year for some reason, or it's taking a little bit longer. Jordan Whitehead is a safety that the Buccaneers signed. They brought him back. He was on the Super Bowl championship team after the 2021 season. He signed a contract with the Jets. The Bucs just really didn't have the cap space to accommodate for him at the time, but it was kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? Amicable split.
Yeah.
Where they can bring him back a couple of years later, and he can hopefully thrive in a Todd Bowles defense just like he was before. And it seems like this year it's just not really clicking as fast for him. Casey Rogers, one of the defensive coaches today, told the media that, Jordan Whitehead, they still believe in him. He's healthy. He's just kind of like with the scheme, with some of the techniques in this defense, he's kind of behind a little bit. And that's an issue, right? Like I think this is a guy who's been in this defense before, and now he's having problems with it. The lack of adjustments, I think, is the other thing that's really, really killing Todd Bowles this year. He's been inconsistent so far over his tenure as Bucs head coach, which is never great. But the thing with the defense is sometimes they're bend but don't break. Sometimes the blitz work. Sometimes it doesn't, and they give up 500 yards to Kirk Cousins. I think the adjustments that are made and aren't made throughout the course of a game, you can't count on him to make the same adjustment 2 times in one season, if that makes sense. I'm trying to piece this together the best way that I can. Time management has been an issue of his before. Throwing the challenge flag has been an issue of his before, where like 1 week he'll hang on to it. Then the next week he's going to throw all of his challenge flags in the first half. He hasn't entirely decided how aggressive he wants to be. So on the defensive side of the ball, I think really a lot of it is this soft coverage, and it is KJ Britt in the middle of the field, the linebacker position. I think he's PFF's worst graded linebacker in coverage.
Yeah, I have it up right now, 83 out of 83, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of crazy how much better we thought he was at the tail end of 2023 there, and he's kind of been a disappointment so far in 2024, but haven't really adjusted. I know some guys are injured. Servassier Dennis was placed on IR. He actually just had surgery, I think, this week or last week. So they're going to be missing him for an extended period of time. Levante David is the ageless wonder, but he certainly can't do it by himself. So the middle of the field has been a problem. The lack of adjustments has been a problem. At times, player execution and tackling has been a problem, but when you're rotating backfields and you have all these injuries, it's tough to find consistency. But I think the regression of this defense is legitimately a concern because you kind of expect a standard from Todd Bowles, and you're winning games, but you're not winning games at this point because of the defense. So I think there's, again, going to be some serious adjustments that need to be made. But for Todd Bowles, I don't want to say he's walking on eggshells here, but I think he's getting close because some of these losses for Tampa Bay this year, whether it's lack of preparation or just getting absolutely destroyed on the defensive side of the ball, most of these losses are a really bad look for Todd Bowles.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it seems like it's just there's too many holes now, especially with the injuries, because I think the secondary was a strength going into the year, but now, with all these injuries, it's becoming much more of an issue. And up front, the pass rush, the Falcons have been by far the worst pass rush. So I'm not trying to throw, stones in a glass house here, but Bucs pass rush seems to have been an issue too. Like the consistent pressure is not really happening, even after Vita Vea's gotten back, even after Kalijah Cansey's gotten back in there. And that, for Atlanta, that's kind of been the one way you can. Atlanta's offense since the Bucs and the Falcons played, that was kind of their awakening game when the Falcons kind of came alive and finally started to be consistent on offense. And last week they only scored 14 points, but they put up 400 yards, turned the ball over 3 times, and win the time of possession battle, which is wild. But they obviously the Seahawks were able to get pressure on Cousins. That's kind of the key to making him make those mistakes and that sort of thing. And you wonder if the Bucs are able to do that, or if the Falcons are going to be able to have success through the air like they did the last time these teams played.
Well, and that's one of the biggest issues and observations that we've had about the Todd Bowles defense, especially this year. The ugly truth of it is if the pass rush doesn't get there, if the blitz that he relies on for 55% of the game does not hit home, well, that's it.
Yeah, wide open space.
Because the lack of depth on the defensive line was going to be an issue coming into this season. We talked a lot about that. But, I mean, even having healthy guys in the interior who can open up holes for other players, having safeties in a defense who are good at rushing the quarterback. Like Antoine Winfield is really good at getting after the quarterback. Jordan Whitehead is a guy they send after every once in a while. But when none of that works, and you look at the coverage and you look at the way this defense is set up, guys are just covering grass. Like Baltimore, Lamar Jackson looked as good as he did throwing the football because he wasn't throwing contested passes. Like Mark Andrews was wide ass open, but there wasn't anyone within 5 yards of him. It's a lot of soft zone. It's a lot of, I guess, exposed zone coverage because guys are just getting more open every single week. And then on top of that, it's this uncanny ability to allow any team's slowest player to somehow be the most wide open at times. I don't understand it. And again, the adjustments are going to have to be made because, we're 8 weeks into the season and teams have got it figured out. If your pass rush isn't going to work, if you cannot disrupt a quarterback, doesn't matter if it's Bo Nix, they're going to throw all over you. They're going to move the football all over you. And it just feels easy to exploit at this point. And again, the lack of depth that we had talked about, the defensive line in particular, you need some real dogs on the defensive line, maybe some edge rushers as well. I don't expect the Bucs to be active in the trade deadline. They never really have been. A lot of people are talking about Cooper Kupp to Tampa Bay. We don't need a busted up 32-year-old wide receiver. No, thank you. I'm okay with the Buccaneers trusting the wide receiver group that they have. If they were to do anything at all in free agency, though, my vote is on the defensive side of the ball. You either need a linebacker to take over for KJ Britt because he's drowning back there, or you need a legitimate pass rusher. I know it was a fire sale for a little bit in Cleveland. I wouldn't expect them to part with a Myles Garrett. Wouldn't even expect them to part with a Myles Garrett cheap. But a man can dream, can he? I mean,
we can all dream about that.
Yeah. This Buccaneers defensive line, they need a Myles Garrett, for lack of a better term.
Sure, we all do. We could all use a good Myles Garrett injection into our defensive lines. But yeah, it doesn't seem likely for any of the NFC South teams at this point. But it seems like the depth has been depleted. I saw a report that Greg Gaines was in a walking boot out of nowhere. today. So that's obviously not good. And I know William Golston was limited. It seems like he's been limited quite a bit, but he typically plays. But I mean, it's you finally get Cansey back out there, and then it's like, nope, Greg Gaines is now just apparently in a walking boot for some reason. So that's just it's brutal. It's just like one hit after another out there. And the same thing with Tyke Smith. It seems like the report today was that he was still not practicing. So it seems unlikely that he's going to be able to get through concussion protocol with just one practice left. It's not impossible, but unlikely. And who do you think would step in for him? Would they go back to like Christian Izzy there, or is there somebody else? Or
Yeah, I think it'd probably be a Christian Izzy. And you talked about Tyreek Funderburg. He can kind of swap back and forth between safety and nickel corner if need be. But he could be another name that they throw in there. I will say, though, Tyke Smith is another huge loss from that game that I think is overshadowed by Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. But for a defensive rookie, Todd Bowles certainly has an eye for some of these guys. Tyke Smith was actually a teammate of Todd Bowles' son at the University of Georgia. So he was watching this guy all year, and he knew exactly the style of defensive back he wanted. He has made an impact, and you certainly hope this doesn't become a lingering thing for him. Concussion protocol is tricky because, most people expect a player to kind of clear it up in a couple of days and come back. And as the Bucs saw with Luke Gedeke at the early part of the season, he ended up missing more than 2 games in concussion protocol. He's worn a guardian cap ever since coming back. So it's very serious business when it comes to concussions. Obviously hope for him to get healthy, but that's a big question mark because you don't expect to lose that much out of a rookie defensive back, but he's a hitter, man. I like him a lot.
No, he's been one of the brightest spots, I think, of all the new guys, the new faces on that defense. So that would be a major loss. And then I know the other guy I think that was now in concern about, obviously Mike Evans isn't going to play, but Payne Durham was the other guy who I think was looking like he had not practiced on Thursday either. So that's a concern. And then Bucky Irving picks up a toe injury. I didn't hear whether he practiced today or not. But, because you would think like the plan is going to be now to lean on the run game more, which really I think that's one of Liam Cohen's biggest accomplishments is the last 2 offensive coaches just couldn't get this run game going. And Liam Cohen comes in and now it looks like it's starting to click. And then one of the biggest contributors ends up with a toe injury and is not practicing. And you hate to hear the word toe ever. I know like maybe fans think toe. It's like, oh, stubbed his toe. It's like, no, that usually means turf toe. And that is an absolute nightmare if you don't know what that injury is. So I don't know if you've heard anything more about Irving or what's going on with that, but.
No, haven't heard a ton about Bucky so far this week. I'm sure we'll get a concrete update by the end of the day tomorrow for sure. But yeah, you talked about the success in the run game this year. And that is something that a lot of people expect the Bucs to lean on. And that can be a little bit of a bad thing, maybe, if everybody expects them to lean on the run game. But they are 8th in the NFL in rushing so far, averaging 135 yards a game. They've had over 100 yards in 5 of 7 games this year. Last year, all of 2023, they only did that 6 times. In 2022 with Tom Brady, Rachaad White's rookie season, they only did it 3 times. 3 out of 17 games, they had 100 yards on the ground. So I cannot overstate how historically bad the Buccaneers run game has been. But looking at a big breakout game from Sean Tucker is definitely going to help the average amount of yards per game they're getting here. But I mean, Bucky Irving has been my favorite running back to watch. He has been a little bit of a godsend here. And then Rachaad White, when he's healthy, getting back in the lineup, had a really good game running the ball against Baltimore first quarter. And I think that's what gives a lot of people hope, too, is not only the stats and where they end up, top 10 in the NFL rushing attack, but they went up against the number 1 rush defense last week, and it seemed like it was the most productive first quarter this run game has maybe ever had. 4 yards per carry for Rachaad White. I know it was garbage time at the end of the game there, but he did find the end zone 2 times. You love to see him get active in that sense, but I think creativity with this run game is going to be important too, because now the Buccaneers have 3 competent running backs that they can use. And the pony formation is what they call their 2 running back set, and they love to use that. But you got to get more creative than just that, because you simply can't change your offensive philosophy just because a couple of guys are down. It's just hard to do that. Like in the middle of the season, it's hard to expect an offensive coordinator to completely change the way he calls plays, completely change how he uses certain personnel. So I think they can get creative in some of those 2 running back sets, but I don't know if they're going to be running out of it, 30, 40 snaps a game. I don't think that would be good for them. So I like where the run game is, but with Bucky Irving, he's kind of, a question mark right now with the injury. I hope he can give it a go. But, I mean, hey, Sean Tucker getting more reps could never possibly be a bad thing. And then again, Rachaad White has the ability to get active in the pass game. He's not my favorite as a runner, but he did look good last week. The offensive line in particular is I think, the biggest part of the success of the run game. We can talk a lot about the individual performance of the running back, but Graham Barton, when he's been healthy, has been playing really well. I thought most of the trenches looked good Monday night against Baltimore. Like, their defensive line, they're no slouch, So the Bucs were moving bodies, and they were opening up run lanes on Monday night. They got to keep doing that because you need to balance out this offensive approach here. It's a pass-first offense, but again, we talked about it at the top of the show. The two top passing weapons you have are now gone.
Yeah. It's tough to know exactly what's going to happen there, but teams are probably going to lose respect for the pass game, which means it's going to be harder for the run game to get going. You talked about how much attention is going to be given to Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. I mean, arguably two of the top 5 best players on the team, if not top 3 best players on the team. So, absolutely brutal to lose that. But, the Falcons defense didn't have a great game last week, certainly against Seattle. Got kind of carved up through the air and on the ground. Actually had one of their better games in terms of rushing yardage allowed some big plays, and that was kind of the difference in that game. But, what do you think the difference will be? The Falcons are probably not going to change their approach. That's the one biggest criticism we have. The Falcons just play nickel. They play nickel like 100% of the time. It doesn't matter the situation. Doesn't matter if it's, 30 seconds left in the half and they have to go 70 yards and you're going to leave your linebackers out there in that situation, I guess, apparently. But, the Falcons are going to play nickel and they're going to play zone and they're going to hope for the best out of that formation. But, what are the Bucs planning to do now with, I know Cade Otton really stepped up in the absence of Mike Evans. I assume he's going to be more involved, but they got a lot of young receivers now, I guess, to decide between in terms of who's going to be the focal point of this passing game. And for me, it's like we saw Baker when he lost Evans, he still wanted to hit those big plays and still chuck it up. And these other guys aren't going to go get it like Mike Evans will. So, I asked you a lot of questions. Let's focus on the receivers first. I have a lot of questions. All right. First of all, what do you think about this receiving group and how that's going to shake out?
No, you're good, man. There's a lot of potential here, but I say that in terms of like a lot of things are going to have to go well, I think, for them to continue to be as successful as they have been throwing the football. Jalen McMillan, for example, he's been a little underwhelming so far this season, and it's not even because he can't get open. It's because he can't hang on to the football. Like that's been a problem with him so far this year. He has, I think this season, let me take a look here. So Jalen McMillan for 2024, he has a 40% catch rate. He is 0 for 5 in contested catches. Again, just not a great look. He's already had a couple of ugly drops this year. Dropped a touchdown week 1. I'm sorry, had the touchdown week 1, but dropped a touchdown a couple of weeks after that. Excuse me. So I think for him, it's going to be a lot of proving he's going to have to do, right? Prove he can make those contested catches. Prove he can go up there and get it. Sterling Shepard, I think it's going to be interesting to see where he is because I'd say he's been the most productive wide receiver 3 the Bucs have had. The veteran status is going to help out a little bit, but I was pleasantly surprised to see the level of juice he is still playing with. So I think if you can get that connection between him and Baker Mayfield going, you get Baker Mayfield playing confident, and you get him a high percentage target. If Shep can do that, that would be a godsend as well. So I think he's going to kind of be that first option when we talk about who is left. They got Raheem Jarrett back in the lineup this week off of IR. Marquez Callaway also in the mix here. They signed him to the practice squad to take Raheem Jarrett's roster spot when he was put on there a little while ago. But Marquez Callaway, I don't know if he gets elevated. It hasn't happened yet, but maybe he gets involved here over the next few weeks, depending on how things shake out. But let's say Sterling Shepard, Jalen McMillan, Trey Palmer, obviously still in the mix as well. I think Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan, it's going to be interesting comparing those two. My gut says Palmer probably gets more looks at first, but if McMillan again can, start to show up consistently, I'd expect him to get a fair share of targets. But if you want me to rank them right now based off of how I feel, levels of trust, I'd say Sterling Shepard 1, Trey Palmer 2, and then Jalen McMillan 3. I hope to see him come around, though, because I like them a lot out of the draft.
Yes, my dynasty team hopes that Jalen McMillan will become the number one wide receiver in Tampa Bay. But, that's probably several years off. But, we play the long game here. But, yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be a different look because I think the biggest thing missing now is the size. Like Baker Mayfield loves those big targets, and there's really not – that's kind of gone from the offense at this point, outside of Cade Otton. So I just – my question is, we saw it toward after Mike Evans went down. The Baker Mayfield didn't really play any differently with these other receivers in the lineup and continued to kind of chuck it down there for them, and that did lead to some turnovers. So are you concerned that Baker's not going to be able to kind of rein it in? He's still going to want to hit those deep plays, and sometimes they'll work, but without these massive contested catch winning targets and Godwin and Evans, I wonder if that's going to lead to some potential problems, especially early on in the transition.
I think Liam Cohen and his approach on the offense this week is going to tell us a lot, obviously. But he said today that he is still figuring it out, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing to hear from our offensive coordinator on a Thursday, especially against
just honest. Yeah.
I can appreciate the transparency. Don't get me wrong. But still trying to figure it out. I think they want to establish early if they can trust this run game. Because if by the end of that first quarter, you can dictate the time of possession, you can maintain long drives, keep your offense on the field, and ultimately come away with points, then you aren't going to need those big spectacular plays over the top. And again, I kind of talked about the success the Bucs offense has had this year. Baker Mayfield playing well. They're not really throwing over the top. Like, they're taking shots downfield, but it doesn't feel like they're taking nearly as many as they were at times in a Dave Canales offense. Having those big decoys down the field, having the size, as you mentioned, is certainly going to help. And I think it brings a new dynamic as to how these guys are going to find ways to get open. But I think it's going to be a lot of high percentage looks, a lot of quick underneath stuff. You're going to be relying on maybe your big physical target, Cade Otton, to make a contested catch, but going to take me a couple of weeks to believe that Jalen McMillan can do it, right? So I'm expecting them to come out early and really kind of decide how much they can rely on this run game. And then setting up play action later in the game, maybe you hit a tight end over the top or something like that. A lot of screen passes. I think you'll see that kind of amp up a little bit as well. You got some shifty guys in that wide receiver room. None of them are Chris Godwin, though. He was the best at yards after catch, especially this season. So that'll be an interesting challenge. But I think in that sense, a lot of the underneath stuff is going to be the same. I just expect more of it. And I think those deep downfield shots, they're going to have to come at more opportune times because you're not going to get those looks quite as often. But yeah, the run game, it all goes back to the run game. I think their plan here over the next couple of weeks is going to rely on how successful these running backs are. So the first quarter of this game against Atlanta, held the first drive. The Bucs have scored a touchdown on their last 4 opening series. I don't know if the streak continues. I would like to see it continue, but let's say it does for the sake of conversation. I think it's going to be 7-8 plays. 5 of those are going to be run plays. And one's going to be a screen pass. One's going to be a play action rollout to a tight end in the flat, Cade Otton. I think they want to see where these guys are at. They're making clear progress. Guys are getting as healthy as they possibly can. Again, Bucky Irving, kind of a question mark, but they had a good start last week against the best run defense in the NFL. I think they come out aggressive here on the ground again.
Yeah. No, I think that the Bucs run game is probably the direction they need to go in. The big question is how do teams just play them completely differently now that they don't respect the threat of the passing game? And that we've seen how that can derail run games, when teams just start stacking the box. And I think the Bucs were probably facing, I don't have the stats, but I'm guessing they were probably facing a very high percentage of light boxes given the talent at receiver and how dangerous Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were. So that's going to be one of the biggest things to watch is, do the Falcons make any adjustments or play this team, more run heavy because of the difference in the receiving talent there. But how the Bucs sort of adjust to these losses will probably make the biggest difference the rest of their season. And along with, like we said, the defensive issues, because I don't know that defensively this team is built to grind out games with the run. This is, I think, a team that was probably in a good spot to be able to win shootouts if the defense wasn't performing. And they have been doing that for the most part, last week notwithstanding. But it's a tough spot for the Bucs. Obviously, critical game this week. This is a critical game for Atlanta too, coming off a disappointing loss. So I agree with you. Like you said at the top, like whoever wins this game is probably going to be the NFC South front runner for the rest of the season. And that doesn't mean that things can't change, but if the Falcons were to get the tiebreaker and build the lead, the Bucs also have to go into this brutal stretch of games, and you're not expecting a ton of wins out of these. You're hoping probably to win this one and then maybe sneak one of the next couple as well. Or Atlanta, then gets to play the Cowboys, who not as scary as a lot of people expected them to be, and then they get to go and play New Orleans again, and we know what New Orleans looks like. So, Atlanta's schedule also just easier throughout the year. In general, they do have to play the Vikings and the Commanders. We'll see if Cliff Kingsbury can keep that thing rolling into December. That's really been his Achilles heel so far. So we'll see. But a critical game, a big one to watch. Definitely, I think one of the games of the week for sure, even if you're not a fan of one of these two teams. But Rhett, really appreciate your insights on the team as always. Guys, he is at Reticus on Twitter. He's one of the hosts of the Cannon Fire podcast. Rhett, plug your stuff. Tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, Cannon Fire Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And you can find myself Instagram and Twitter at Reticus, Rhettakus. There is a lot on the line this Sunday. And, I think these are a couple of resilient football teams. I think it's going to be one hell of a game, regardless of where they end up at the end of it. It should be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, if it's anything like the last one, we're gonna need some Tums at the end of this one. It's gonna be an absolute barn burner. So that was one of the best games of the year. Like, even if you probably, especially if you weren't a fan of one of these teams, because you were probably less stressed out. But we'll see if this one can live up to that. But hopefully, just a good game, and maybe we can just stop the injury bug. Like, if we could just have that would be at least a step in the right direction. But critical game here. Looking forward to it, guys. I'm Kevin Knight of Falcoholic Kevin. Thanks for watching the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Please like, subscribe, leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Check out the Patreon. It's patreon.com/falcoholic live. If you're a YouTube enjoyer, check out the channel memberships. Check out thefalcoholic.com as well for all our terrific written content. We'll be back Sunday afternoon following the game for that post-game show as well. Until next time, guys, thanks for joining us. We will see you. Have a good one.